Hello and welcome to Everyday Canines video. In this episode about early takeoff syndrome, we're discussing whether there can be a physical component to the problem. What do I mean by that? We've already discussed that early takeoff syndrome is generally considered an eyesight issue. It can be a variety of problems within the eyesight. It could be as simple as being short-sighted, long-sighted, or it could be something as serious as something like a hereditary condition that causes the dog to go blind. What that means is the dog cannot see correctly where it's going to jump to take off over a pole, so it cannot work out properly where things are. Basically, it's got not great depth perception. But could there be something else going on in this picture that is affecting that jump style? And if we can change that, can we make the jump style better? Well, I believe there can be a physical element to this problem other than eyesight. And again, it comes from my experiences with Sparrow, who has early takeoff syndrome and who I've worked on with various things. And she also has luxating patella, which is a fairly common condition in small dogs, doing agility and small dogs in general. Now, this physical element, it goes back to how a dog jumps. So when we see a dog jumping, we want it to be taking off from the back end. We want it to be powering with those back legs to push it and propel it over a jump. What we see in a lot of dogs, inexperienced dogs and also dogs that have not been trained to jump correctly, is they tend to power from the front end. They don't know how to switch their balance properly onto the rear end to get all the power through the rear end. Equally, if a dog has an issue with the hindquarters, in Sparrow's case luxating patella, then they can start to transfer their weight to their front to compensate and effectively stop using the back end at all to take off. So in Sparrow's case, she was hardly using her back end at all. She was effectively flinging herself over jumps using her front end completely. And that sounds counterintuitive. You think, can they do it? But having seen it and knowing what she was doing, she could still jump fine, but this is what she was doing. She was not using the hind end properly. Now, when you're not using your hind end properly, you're not jumping properly. And you've got to take off in a different place to fling yourself over a jump using your front quarters than if you come up nicely to a jump and use your back end to power properly over. Now, at the time, with her luxating patella, I did not consider it part of the problem of her ETO. I thought they were two independent problems. I went to a physio for her luxating patella, and we worked with a physio for 8 months doing no agility, improving her hind end awareness, improving her muscles, strengthening her basically. And I have to say it was a huge success. We later went and saw a specialist who took x-rays and looked there, and effectively the knees were so solid, he said had he not had the original diagnosis of luxating patella and she'd actually had popped a knee, he would not have known that she had an issue with her knees, and he couldn't get them to pop under sedation or anything. So huge success. She's now got all this muscle on her back end. She knows how to use her back end as well, because we've given the back end awareness by making her think about her rear end. And then her jumping style changed again. So she stopped doing the ETO quite so much. And this was interesting because I had not expected that to happen. I had thought that the ETO was something that could not be changed. But now she actually jumps really well, and we do occasionally have the odd mistake and she misjudges a pole and takes off too soon. But on the whole, she's jumping a lot better. And the only piece of this puzzle that changed, because I cannot change her eyesight, is that we worked on her muscling, on her rear end awareness and all that. So we effectively worked on her fitness and changed her fitness, and that has helped the ETO. So this makes me think that there can be an element of fitness, physicality connected to the ETO. And this is where it's led me to think, because I've done a lot of research on jumping for Sparrow, that potentially in a lot of dogs with ETO, part of the issue is a misunderstanding of how to jump. And if we can correct that understanding and also build up the musculature in their back legs, then we may find that their ETO diminishes because they have a better understanding of how they jump. It's jump education, full stop. I'm not necessarily saying jump grids themselves, because I think some dogs with ETO, certainly Sparrow, can find jump grids incredibly frustrating and they're not productive, because that's a different thing altogether. What I'm suggesting is things like exercises, first of all, that are building up the awareness of the back end, such as changing surfaces they're walking on, getting them to think about their individual feet by doing things like stepping over a pole, so they have to think about these hind legs, and also building up the muscle so they've got the power there to take off. Because maybe in some of these cases it's because the dog doesn't feel it's got enough power to take off when it gets close to the jump, that it takes off too soon. Because if we imagine it, when we see a dog jump off properly, it's a bit like a horse doing a jump. A horse, when they're doing the show jumping, the rider gets the horse really close, closer than we think would be sensible, and the horse takes off vertically. That's how you jump correctly, because then you're putting all the power through the back legs and thrusting yourself over. When we see a lot of dogs that do early takeoff, they are taking off way back, and they're not taking off vertically, they're almost taking off like this shallow curve. Now, could this be in part because the dog doesn't feel it has enough strength in the back end to do the vertical takeoff? Does it feel that if it levels out and does this long jump instead, does it feel more comfortable doing that? Now, if we change that balance and we change it so they can take off with the back end, will that change the situation? Will that change their jumping style? In Sparrow's case, it definitely did, and it was an unexpected and really good consequence of the physio. Of course, it might not change all dogs, because ETO is such a big, broad problem with lots of complexities and different elements. So we can't say it's going to help every dog, but I think it could help a lot of dogs. And I actually think there's something that's missing in a lot of education for dogs. And certainly when I started, it was not something I ever thought about, teaching my dogs the correct way to jump. Didn't even cross my mind. And I think that's an element that's missing a lot. If we look at a lot of dogs, if you look at them, the power is not there in their hindquarters. They've got these flimsy hindquarters. They're not got the strength there they should have to take off correctly over a jump. You want to see that nice musculature. We don't want to see them overly muscle. We're not talking Arnold Schwarzenegger or anything like that, but we want to see a decent amount of muscle that they can use when they're propelling themselves over a jump. So how do we correct this if we think that could be an issue with the dog? Well, I heartily recommend that anybody who's doing agility on a full stop should be seeing a physio, a veterinary physio. Now, there are other experts out there, massage, chiropractic, there's lots out there, hydrotherapy. However, the physio will look at the whole body, and they look at the way the dog is put together, and they identify any weaknesses in different areas. That is not something that generally massage and chiropractic hydrotherapy therapists do unless they have that physio element to their practice. So seeing a physio and asking them to assess the dog, say, is there a weakness anywhere that we can need to adjust? Is that the same as if you were doing this on a human athlete? Exactly what a human would do. And the changes can be subtle. I mean, all my dogs see a physio. We found with Swift, even though she has no particular problems, we found that she was more prone. She favoured her right side. She's naturally right-pawed. And so she was a little bit weaker on her left hind leg, and so she wasn't turning so well left, because she at the time had to jump 45, and she is about 35.5 centimetres. So that extra leaping and turning left was really struggling. She was knocking poles. So we worked with that and improved her fitness. And I think we have to bear in mind, certainly with agility these days, we are asking our dog to do an awful lot with their bodies. We're asking them to be canine athletes. And we shouldn't treat agility as their fitness class. We should treat it as the thing they do because they are fit enough to do it. I mean, you hear people who say, oh, my dogs, they do go once a week to do agility and that's their fitness class. No. They should be fit enough to do agility. Agility is the icing on the cake of the fitness. So those are my thoughts on whether there's a physical element to a problem with your dog. Now, if your dog is suffering from early takeoff and you go to the physio and they find, oh, we can build this muscle up here, we can do this, or they find nothing, it's one thing you've ruled out. It may be that you discover they could do it being more muscular here, and if we do that, then it may improve their jump style. It may not, but it's one thing to rule out, and it certainly won't hurt them. And quite frankly, if you're doing agility with your dog, I think it's a very good idea to know what's going on with them and make sure they are appropriately muscled to be able to do this sort of stuff, because it is hard work on their bodies. I hope this makes sense, and I hope this gives you some more ideas of what you can do about early takeoff syndrome. And if you've enjoyed this video, you might like to check us out on Facebook, and we're on Instagram, and you can also subscribe to us on YouTube. And we also now have a Buy Me a Coffee support page, so you can check that out. And if you'd like to become a supporter of what we do, you can sign up there. And I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope to see you all again very, very soon.